Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Healing Horizons. Each week, we share the latest news and research in trauma informed care, positive and adverse childhood experiences, and psychological safety. I'm Allison Sabula.
And I'm Bree Twombly, and we both work at 10 Collective, where we are working to create a world where we genuinely care for one another. We want you to consider hiring us here at 10 to support you in implementing trauma-informed care, as well as psychological safety-based programs and policies to allow you to better care for your employees, who then in turn can care for the families and communities that you are partnering with. You can learn more about us on our LinkedIn page or go to tend-collective.com. And you should also check out our YouTube page. We have a good amount of webinars up there and one more that will be added very soon that you should definitely check out.
Yeah, our advisor, Dr. Danielle Prince, did a webinar last night, empowering family healers about how we can take better care of frontline service workers in social services and related industries, what she's calling family healers. And it was such an inspiring webinar. I highly recommend checking that out. It'll be up on YouTube today. So definitely head over to our YouTube channel. So let's get into the news today. Today is Thursday, September 26th, 2024, and an advisory, which is that we'll be talking about trauma, which sometimes includes violence. So, trauma-informed care news. SIU, which stands for Southern Illinois University, launches a new program to better train counselors who treat complex trauma. So, a $1 million plan gift to establish the Kaufman Crothers Training Institute for Trauma and Psychological Health Endowment Fund. Oh, that's going to be a really fun acronym. And annual contributions to provide training to address complex trauma, including a symposium next month. And here's a quote from Holly Cormier, licensed clinical psychologist and director there. But while complex trauma may be very common, there is a huge gap in training practitioners to treat adults who have suffered complex trauma. And complex trauma is just when there's a lot of trauma every day, or almost every day, to where your fight or flight response is pretty much constantly going. So, a lot of times when we talk about complex trauma, we're talking about complex childhood trauma where your entire childhood felt stressful. A lot of times that can be because of economic factors. So if your household doesn't have enough money to pay basic bills, there's going to be this current of underlying stress that's just always present in your household. Other common reasons that someone may grow up with complex childhood trauma is if a parent has substance use disorder, or a mental health issue. So those are some of the big ones that may cause like some level of stress to where you're constantly on edge almost every day. And this doesn't say childhood complex trauma, so I'm not sure if they're referring to that also in adulthood, which I haven't really seen it that much, so I'm not sure. What do you think, Brie?
I'm not sure about this in this case.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've normally heard of it in terms of like complex like childhood trauma when you have experience, but it makes sense as an adult, right? Like as an adult, you can continue to face economic hardships where you're struggling to pay bills, you're struggling to kind of meet basic needs. That's highly stressful,
Or would we?
especially if then you throw a family,
Oh
like then
yeah,
you're responsible for other people on top of that. And what does that mean for your stress level too?
we
So
were just talking about the complex trauma of being an American citizen and reading
yes.
the news every day, which I have to laugh because otherwise I would just cry all the time. But it's really, really traumatic to constantly see just how much violence we've normalized in the United States, and just trying to exist. I think in the U.S. Um, can be a big reason to have complex trauma. Although I will say there's lots of self-regulation tools that are helpful, because even though it's stressful to exist in the U.S., each one of us has an opportunity to figure out how to exist, and to show up and still show up with a good amount of love and hope that, we can overcome a lot of the things that feel like too much right now. So I want to make sure I mention that. I'm not too cynical, but it's really hard also. um, so the American Psychological Association doesn't currently recognize complex trauma as a distinct treatment classification. So there's no specific training to address it. Cormier said the situation is akin to asking a general practitioner to perform heart surgery. Oh, that's interesting. I think I disagree with that. Like people are talking about complex trauma. I think it's in the vernacular, and I think a lot of a general practitioner. Yeah, I'm not sure. It's not that one medical professional is superior. It's just that the general practitioner isn't trained to perform heart surgery. And likewise, a typical counselor isn't trained to treat complex trauma. Okay, maybe I agree with that. Okay, fine.
Yeah, I think as someone who went to like learn how to do therapy,
Yeah,
I know I sought out like courses and then like through my internships that I had, like specifically related to trauma. But I know that there were interns that I had, or just talking with like recent graduates that were like, we had one class, like one like
yeah,
single session within a class where trauma was talked about. There
totally.
often treatment for trauma is something that you seek out and learn after.
Right,
Um, and that's not ideal because we're interacting with people who have experienced trauma all the time. And I think that's a reason why a lot of trauma doesn't actually get addressed. People see anxiety or depression or other symptoms, and really the root of that is the trauma.
right,
So
right,
that's my kind of 2 cents on that.
right. Completely. Okay, next piece, the Queensland Trauma Strategy 2024 to 2029. Okay, great. Australia's back strong. Yeah, we report on them a lot because they're doing so much. Yeah, here they are again. Okay. The strategy establishes a whole of government, whole of community approach for integrating trauma-informed practice across Queensland. It is a 5-year strategy that seeks to ensure they create the best possible conditions for individuals, families, and carers and communities to receive the right support as early as possible. To move towards a more trauma informed Queensland, a collaborative partnership based approach is required across government and the community. All touch points a person has across the system should include a focus on preventing trauma. That should be the bare minimum,
I
please.
know.
Providing accessible support early, enabling people and communities who have experienced trauma to explore what healing means to them, and enabling reform to strengthen the system. Systemic enablers for change. Brilliant. Thank you, Australia.
Yes, yet again, they are trying to center the voices and experiences of those who have experienced trauma. And that's informing so many things that it seems like they're doing in Australia, including this report. And the prevention piece. Let's focus on the prevention, building those positive childhood experiences, changing
Really,
systemic
yeah,
barriers.
how is the system traumatizing and how can we become aware of that?
Yep.
I think,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
Not going to go down that rabbit hole again with the US. We're leaving it. Okay.
But thank you, Australia. Our next is out of England, and this is Serious Violence Partnership awards £68,642 to expand Parents Under Pressure program. And so this program began in 2023, and the new award extends the program to support additional families with complex needs, including parental substance abuse and children either currently engaged with child protection or those who are at imminent risk of going into care. It focuses on working with the parents to develop emotional regulation skills, confidence, and to be emotionally supportive so they can support their children in developing their own self-regulation. Amazing. Thank you.
Perfect.
Parenting is hard and stressful. And sometimes as adults, we didn't have relationships, to be able to learn some of those healthy coping and emotional skills ourselves. So to have an opportunity to learn some different skills as an adult so we can address our own emotions and be responsive instead of reactive toward our child is amazing. And that can help the children to be able to learn some of those healthy regulation skills, which is a protective factor that helps to buffer if they do experience stressful situations. So wonderful. The expansion of the program will target early intervention within families that have high risk factors for becoming involved in serious violence. The project is a part of the protective public health approach to serious violence, aiming to not just tackle the problem, but prevention again, its occurrence. It will help protect children and young people from experiencing adverse childhood experiences while building resilience and other protective factors. Addressing these challenges reduces the potential for children to become involved in a life of crime, violence, and drugs. So great. Lots of things aimed to buffer against the impact of ACEs or to prevent experiencing ACEs. So love to see that.
Yeah.
The next is life-changing Inside Islands Indigenous Specific Trauma-Informed Daycare. And this one, I was so excited to read this article. There's like so many amazing things happening in this. So this is a daycare that's part of a growing number of what they call life-changing for Indigenous families childcare spaces that have been created since 2018 in 23 different communities across British Columbia. This specific center has 48 spaces, so 24 for infants and toddlers and 24 for children ages 3 to 5. The center really puts an emphasis on child mental health care, fostered by larger, brighter spaces with windows, accessing green space, higher staff to children ratio, and a therapist on staff. So access to green space, brightness, like nature, wonderful. That high staff to child ratio is wonderful. And having a therapist who is just on staff and available is amazing, and something that I know that in my career we've constantly talked about, like how to make that possible, because it's really hard from a funding perspective sometimes to be able to do that in a really important need. So they talked about how the rooms at the child care center are larger than is what is required. And a quote from them says that was really important for trauma-informed care because it was important that kids had places where they could go and have quiet time if they needed, or just be able to sit with someone and get a hug. Also, I think kids need space to play and grow and learn. We talk a lot about that, of like the purpose of childhood is to play and to learn. So being able to kind of like focus on that, and classrooms can be really overwhelming sometimes. The fact that they're thinking about like areas where children can go to calm down and have a quieter space within there is wonderful too. They talked specifically about the therapist on staff who helps children who are struggling or in need of extra support, but also gives staff information on how to best support the child. And this quote I love so much. It's about us changing how we approach the child. What are their needs, as opposed to how do we manage that child's behavior? It's helping everybody because it's Indigenous worldview. A child does not function as an individual. They're part of a community. And so we talk a lot about this here, thinking about kind of community care and how are we kind of helping and supporting one another. And I think there's a lot of the term behavior management that's used. How do we manage this child's behavior instead of being curious about why the behavior is happening, or being curious for ourselves as the adult about what is activating to us about the behavior and makes it hard for us to be responsive. So I love that the therapist is really helping them to change their kind of mindset around that and center the Indigenous perspective within that too.
Amazing.
Let's see. So then another quote is truth and reconciliation to me is changing our ways of knowing and being. It's changing how we show up. It's changing how we treat people. It's creating an environment of love and care. And so that's what we're trying to do here. And I loved that because that's also what we're trying to do at Tend. So a program after our own hearts, I think.
Yeah.
And then they also said we don't put enough emphasis or understanding on the impacts of trauma on the brain and how that can impact a child's ability to hit their developmental milestones and stuff like that. And sometimes that can be reversed through love, care, and rebuilding the kids. So just again, focusing on some of those positive childhood experiences and healing for the kids through a developmentally appropriate way. So yeah, yes, I love that, and I want that replicated
Yeah,
through
it's really
so
good.
many childcare centers.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great news. Really good one. Um, okay, in our adverse childhood experiences science section, we have one study today, association of child maltreatment and school bullying among Chinese adolescents, the mediating role of peer relationships. And we've been seeing and reporting on quite a few bullying and or related studies coming out of China. So
Mhm.
I'm really curious about why this has become such a focus of research, or maybe it's just popping up on our radar more. I'm just have some curiosity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so this was in BMC Public Health, September 2024. The purpose of this study was to examine the association between childhood maltreatment and school bullying in adolescence and to assess the mediating role of peer relationships. So a little over 2,000 adolescents aged between 12 and 18 in the Guangdong province in China. Those were the subjects. And self report questionnaires were employed to collect data on childhood maltreatment, school bullying, and peer relationships. So the results indicated that adolescents who had experienced maltreatment were more at risk of bullying victimization, bullying perpetration, and bully victimization compared to adolescents who had no history of maltreatment. Sexual abuse showed the most significant connection with all forms of bullying. Um, that breaks my heart. Peer relationships were found to mediate the association between child maltreatment and bullying behavior. Um, okay. The results indicate that worse peer relationships may exacerbate the adverse effects of maltreatment experiences and increase the risk of adolescents becoming bullies, either perpetrators or victims of bullying. The results underscore the crucial role of early intervention in cases of child maltreatment and the fostering of positive peer relationships in schools. Yeah, I mean, I think overall it's saying that having a positive relationship with someone, having these positive childhood experiences can really buffer the negative ones. And so if it's bad at home and it's bad at school, this is going to perpetuate these these dynamics of being either a perpetrator or a victim. So that makes complete sense. Like beings need healthy relationships somewhere. There needs to be somewhere safe you can go and someone safe you can talk to. So I think, even if not every household can be fixed, um, it would be important that there's like a good teacher, or making sure that they have at least one good friend, something like that. So yeah. Hmm. Okay. Psychological safety, the hidden workforce crisis, addressing generational trauma for organizational success. So this is in Forbes. Um, and we'll have links up for all of these um, by tomorrow. So make sure you go to 10-collective.com or sign up on our newsletter to get this emailed to you so you can take a deep dive into anything we mention. But generational trauma refers to the psychological effects passed down from one generation to another, often rooted in historical oppression, violence, or severe stress. This trauma isn't just a memory or story, it's encoded in our very biology. Generational trauma influences not only personal lives, but also work behaviors, stress responses, and relationships with colleagues. So it's critical. Yeah, overlooked, not for us. Factor in workplace dynamics. We're experts. We don't overlook it. Hire us, and we'll come look at yours for you, and we'll help you figure it out. Um, so um, Unaddressed generational trauma is more than a personal issue. It's also a systemic challenge that often goes unnoticed and unaddressed. So, here's a few examples of what generational trauma can look like in the office. So, um, And it's fun. I'm like, who wrote this? I'm like, we could have written this. We need to submit to Forbes. Okay. High vigilance, an overreactive threat detection system, and leading to difficulty trusting colleagues and authority figures. So if someone grew up with a lot of stress, and it's interesting that they're kind of focusing on generational trauma. So let's say, what's like a more recent generational trauma? Um, well, okay. Um, More recently, I would say a piece of generational trauma would be that our generation and younger has grown up with a lot of hypervigilance around shootings happening in schools or in random places in America. And so the way that may manifest, if, for example, there was a student who brought a gun to my high school when I was a high school student, and no one was harmed, but this was still a very stressful um, occurrence that happened, that I personally was of the generation where this happened and I experienced it. So it's not abstract. And so I may then go into the workforce with hypervigilance um, in certain specific ways as a result of this trauma that people of my generation have all experienced. So, including just being hyper alert to threats and danger, um, and a general sense of feeling not safe. So that could be one example of generational trauma and how it shows up in the workplace. Um, the article lists a couple other things: imposter syndrome, meaning you feel that you don't deserve success, which could be a result, it says, of systemic oppression. Um, Stress sensitivity, so an exaggerating stress response impacting decision making and performance. Absolutely. Um, yeah, I'll just kind of read through and not get too deep in the weeds here, but definitely check out this article. So it can hinder organizational growth in terms of being a talent drain, innovation stagnation, um, cultural disconnect, and leadership pipeline gaps. Yeah, those are certainly all true. And the piece stresses that through neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to form new neural connections, we can create environments that support healing and growth through self-awareness, fostering open dialogue, having culturally responsive mental health support, um, narrative reframing workshops, definitely, mindfulness practices, intergenerational mentoring programs, and promoting work-life balance, which for me, I would like to see work-life balance replaced with stop asking your employees to work unreasonable hours, and community building initiatives. Um, so organizations have a responsibility to address hidden impacts of generational trauma. And I think I personally would reframe that. I would say that organizations you don't have a responsibility. That's really not the agreement here, right? Workers come to work for you. They're saying, I'm going to do all this work and you're going to pay me. That's the basic agreement. But if you ignore these things, you are going to suffer as an organization. So these really should actually be tools to build a really robust culture and organization that fosters innovation, where employees feel seen and valued. They're more creative, they're more collaborative, they stay for a longer period of time. They're constantly suggesting new innovations and coming up with new ways to help increase your business. So I wouldn't say it's a responsibility, but I think if you ignore it, you fail to do it, your business will suffer and your organization will suffer. So that's such a good one to wrap up on, because this is exactly what we founded 10 Collective to help with. So if you're struggling at your workplace with low morale, maybe a lack of connection, a lack of clarity, a lot of maybe a lot of conflict, a lot of chaos, come talk to us, share with us what's going on, and we'll let you know if we have solutions. Then we can help you. We love helping nonprofits, government agencies, businesses figure out how to create a thriving business or organization by taking better care of employees. And yeah, we would love to help you with that. So Thank you so much.